I don't know how I ended up here. Everything is clear up to a point. I feel as if I drank a lot and at some moment everything went black. I'm not hungover, though I have that feeling of strangeness you get when you wake up after a night of drinking and you're trying to remember what happened. The room, which you know so well, feels slightly foreign. Your recent memories are shrouded in a dense fog that gradually dissipates. The effort of readapting to reality is then increased by the need to reconstruct the entire sequence of events. But now it's not about that. I'm not hungover. My head doesn't hurt. I'm not dizzy. I don't have that persistent feeling of thirst, not even nausea. I'm just restless because I'm in a room I don't recognize, and it resembles the laboratories from sci-fi movies where, on a bed covered with a white sheet and an olive green tarp at the foot end, surrounded by sophisticated instruments, beings from other worlds conduct experiments on humans. Though nobody abducted me. I am, however, a prisoner in this blue room, as if in a dream of which I am aware, and where I move and act voluntarily. I know that at some point something, an apparently insignificant detail, will fill me with horror or put me in an extreme situation, and then unknown forces will snatch me from here and throw me back into my world. I'll return to the bench in Mogyoroshe Park, where I fell asleep without realizing it. That's where my last memory comes from. I suddenly felt very tired and sat down on the bench. Next to me was a bag full of groceries from the market. Apples, tomatoes, cucumbers, a bundle of onions, bananas, a few oranges, and a pomegranate that I hadn't bought for myself. I never liked pomegranates, but she did, so I bought one to give away. I sat down on the bench with this thought. I'm 50 years old. I've just been fired, and I'm alone. I was talking to myself, but as if about another person. How unbearable, I thought, is that murky feeling after getting drunk. But even harder to endure is the moment of returning to reality. Even in a sterile blue room, where the only noise is the buzzing of neon lights hidden in the coves at the edges of the ceiling. In any case, whoever designed this room didn't have much taste. Maybe it was created for some crazy scientist who will appear at some point and tell me that my body will be used to test a drug that will eradicate who knows what disease. There was also the other noise, the one I heard with irritating acuity, which systematically gnawed at my nerves, the ringing in my ears. Then there was the memory of the episode with the woman who walked past me on the path, dragging a little girl of about 7 or 8 years old who asked her, with the usual sincerity of children, "Mommy, is that man going to die?" And again I had the feeling that it wasn't about me, that someone else was the protagonist of that dream scene, since I could still see everything that was happening and clearly heard the little girl's question. I was living a kind of semi-consciousness that still kept me connected to the world. After that, however, there was only emptiness, nothingness, a void. And then waking up in this room, with its maddening loneliness. I had the feeling that everything was a facade, that I was actually a character in an absurd play. I, resignedly waiting for Godot's death, which will eventually come. And then these notes in the black-covered notebook, which will most likely be erased overnight, whatever night meant in the flow of time in this space, because an unseen authority decided so. And then I told myself, this imprisonment in the blue room must be a dream, because everything is, after all, about dreams and forgetting. And I remembered the 3 black-covered notebooks at home, which I had bought to write the story, about the bet with myself, or rather the promise I made to myself that if I managed to fill these notebooks, the story would be finished and thus fulfill an older desire of mine. Over a year ago, after she was gone, I began filling the 3 black-covered notebooks with a hodgepodge of notes, memories, conjectures, doubts, fears, heart-wrenching truths, and telltale signs of my helplessness and despair. Late into the night, after returning from the newsroom, weary and worn, with glassy eyes and an aching back, I set aside the day's mundane duties and lost myself in the story. After toiling all day on some lackluster article, I felt the time had come to share the story. That longer narrative I had toyed with in my mind, conjuring up various renditions. Yet they all dissipated when faced with the act of picking up the pen and making those first marks. I didn't know where to start or which word would usher me into the story. I couldn't see well enough. I was stymied by the multitude of potential paths. No matter how hard I tried to cling to the thread that would guide me to the end, it felt like everything slipped from my grasp, the text I once saw so vividly evaporating in an instant. Despite attempting to avoid the facile temptation by infusing it with fantastical twists, the story circled back, like an organ functioning autonomously, to the matter that truly consumed me. I had to know if my jackknife was still in the basement of that villa with the triangular pediment on Nikolai Yorga Street, number 37. My thoughts, no matter their direction, gravitated toward this topic. Countless times, I projected the enigmatic image of that basement onto the canvas of my memory. The villa, with the triangular pediment, nestled in the street of my childhood. I envisioned it as if in a dream, a chasm yawning wide as my father removed the folksy doormat and pushed aside the wooden hatch fastened to the rectangular angle iron frame. The scent of damp mold and wet walls wafting from the cellar's depths struck me each time. Following my father's lead, I leaned on the uneven, damp, and coarse brick wall, descending the thick, rough-hewn wooden steps of the staircase that seemed to plunge me into a boundless abyss of darkness and the unknown. Though in reality it had only a few steps, that staircase felt endless. As I stepped down cautiously, I experienced the sensation of sinking gradually into shadowy waters teeming with lurking, perilous creatures lying in wait to ensnare me. There, in the narrow space between the barrel of cabbage and the wall, where only a frail child like myself could slip through, I knew I would find the brick that, by some odd twist of fate, had become detached from its resting place. Behind it, in the small alcove, lay my hiding spot, the place where I had left my jackknife given to me by the man who had emerged from our basement, from the city's underground depths. The knife was proof that the man in the cellar had existed, that he wasn't merely the figment of a child's vivid imagination. My father would mock me each time I reminded him of the man in the cellar and my forgotten jackknife, hastily left behind during our move. He always insisted that the entire episode had taken place solely in my head, that I had concocted it all, and that children in general invent stories only they believe. But I knew the jackknife had to be in that spot, hidden behind the brick, because I hadn't made any of it up, and I was the one who had put it there myself. I hesitated to tell the story of the jackknife not only because it seemed hard to believe, but also because I didn't know where to begin. I was missing that spark, the key word of the opening sentence. But now the spark exists. The jackknife is here before me, just as I received it from the man in the cellar. It lies, with its pearly handles and gleaming blade, amongst the other objects found on the rectangular table. Each of them holds some connection to a greater or lesser extent to my former life.